Okay, this is part 2 of chapter 4. Forgive me for that last little bit. In the first part of chapter 4, I was very sleepy after working all day and recording, so I apologize for that. Verse 29, things which are hidden belong to Yahweh, our Elohim, but the things that have been revealed belong to us and to our children forever, so that we can observe all the words of this Torah. It was the responsibility of believers to orally teach the word of Yahweh to future generations so that the instructions, decrees, and commands would be kept. This is reiterated in 1 Corinthians 10, 1 through 33. For I do not wish you to be ignorant, brothers, that all our fathers were under the cloud, and all passed through the sea, and all were immersed into Moses in the cloud and in the sea, and all ate the same spiritual food, and all drank the same spiritual drink. For they drank of that spiritual rock that followed, and the rock was Messiah. However, with most of them, Elohim was not pleased, for they were laid low in the wilderness, and these became examples for us, so that we should not lust after evil as those indeed lusted, and do not become idolaters, as some of them, as it has been written, the people sat down to eat and to drink, and stood up to play. Neither should we commit whoring, as some of them did, and in one day 23,000 fell. Neither let us try Messiah, as some of them also tried, and were destroyed by serpents. Neither grumble, as some of them also grumbled, and were destroyed by the destroyer. And all these came upon them as examples, and they were written as a warning to us, on whom the ends of the ages have come, so that he who thinks he stands, let him take heed lest he fall. No trial has overtaken you, except such as is common to man, and Elohim is trustworthy, who shall not allow you to be tried beyond what you are able, but with the trial shall also make the way of escape, enabling you to bear it. Therefore, my beloved ones, flee from idolatry. So that is all scripture. That is not my words. This is spoken after Yeshua's death. Unfortunately, many dropped the ball, and it seems few along the way cared enough to search the scriptures out. In 2 Kings 13, 5 and 6, Jehoahaz became king of Israel in Samaria. He followed the sins of Jeroboam, which he caused Israel to commit, so for a long time they were oppressed. When Jehoahaz sought Messiah's favor, Messiah provided a deliverer, and they escaped. However, they did not turn away from their sins, and the Asherah pole remained standing in Samaria. Almost every king that the people asked for did evil in the eyes of Yahweh, as did the very last king, Hoshea. Chapter 17 tells us that all this took place because the Israelites and those with them had sinned. They worshipped other gods and followed the practices of the other nations, as well as the practices that the kings of Israel had introduced. They built high places in all their towns. They set up sacred stones and Asherah poles on every high hill and under every spreading tree. They burned incense and worshipped idols. Though Yahweh warned them through prophets and seers to turn from their ways and observe his commands and decrees, in accordance with the entire law that he had commanded them, they were stiff-necked and would not heed what they were told. They continued in their ways, so Yahweh removed them from his presence. He exiled the northern kingdom, afflicted them, and gave them over to plunderers. The king of Assyria brought people to settle in Samaria to replace the Israelites. They did not worship Yahweh, so he, Yah, sent lions to kill some of them. The king had someone go there to teach them, but each group made its own gods. They worshipped Yahweh, but they also served their own gods in accordance with the customs of the nations from which they had been brought. Verse 40 tells us that to this day their children and grandchildren continue to do as their fathers did. Manasseh, in chapter 21, rebuilt the high places his father had torn down and erected altars to Baal and made an Asherah pole. He sacrificed his son to Molech, practiced sorcery and divination, and consulted mediums and spiritists. He then took the carved Asherah pole and put it in the temple. Yahweh said he would wipe out Jerusalem as one wipes a dish, and would forsake the remnant of his inheritance and hand them over to their enemies. He said they would be looted and plundered by all their foes. 2 Chronicles tells us that Manasseh was taken prisoner, had a hook put in his nose, was bound with shackles and taken to Babylon. Because of his distress, he humbled himself before Yahweh. Yahweh was moved and brought him back to Jerusalem. Then he knew that Yahweh is Elohim. He got rid of foreign gods and removed the Asherah pole and altars he had put in the temple. His son Amon did the same as his father first did and was killed in his own palace. Josiah did what was right in the eyes of Yahweh. Yahweh was going to bring disaster on Judah for all they had done, but because Josiah humbled himself and wept in Yahweh's presence, Yah heard him and spared him from seeing the disaster he was going to bring. Josiah renewed the covenant, which the people then pledged themselves to. He had all the articles for Baal and Asherah removed. He took the Asherah pole from the temple and burned it in the Kidron Valley. He then took the ashes to Bethel, the very place where worship of the golden calf had originally polluted the land. He also got rid of spiritist, household gods, idols, and other detestable things. He then reinstated the Passover. However, because of the sins of Manasseh, Yahweh did not turn away from his anger and promised to remove Judah from his presence as he had done Israel. All kings after Josiah did evil in the eyes of Yahweh. The point of the aforementioned information is to demonstrate that Yahweh makes covenant with us. We choose to break covenant. He restores us. Then we go back to our old ways. And again, Yahweh's commands were not just for the Israelites. They were and are for everyone who believes in him. Our fathers and leaders, like those of the Israelites, perished because of their own disobedience. They willfully persecuted those who would condemn popular syncretism. We, in turn, did not learn from their lessons and instead follow after the ways of our fathers. Though I had read all this before, Yahweh brought revelation about all of this as I began writing. Though books and websites are helpful as tools for information, all the information we need is contained within the pages of His Word. By splitting up the Bible into two sections, we limit Old Testament scripture to being only about history. I was told by one of my pastors at the time that the Old Testament points to Christ. That is true. However, so does the New Testament. Both are necessary to understanding Yahweh's complete truth, and obviously that would be Messiah. We must have continuity with the past. Like a house, we need a solid foundation to build upon. A table without legs will not stand. John 1:1 says that in the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with Yahweh, and the Word was Yahweh. He, Yeshua, was with Yahweh in the beginning. Through him all things were made. Without him nothing was made that has been made. In him was life, and that life was the light of men. This speaks of Messiah, and that he, though made flesh, was always with Yahweh. He did not just show up on the scene as a baby. He was always there. Again, as I was studying over the last 14 years, Yahweh spoke to me that splitting up the word is like splitting Yahweh and Yahshua. It cannot be done. Yahshua is the word Torah. When we are told that Yahshua came to fulfill the law, it is said as though fulfilling means put an end to or complete, as in finished or done away with. The word translated fulfill, the written word to that point was translated from Hebrew to Greek, as many Greek-speaking Gentiles began to come to faith in Messiah during the first century. Actually means to establish, confirm, fill full, and bring to life. That is, to cause Yahweh's will, as made known in the law, to be obeyed as it should be, and Yahweh's promises given through the prophets to receive fulfillment. Romans 8:4 asserts that through Messiah Yeshua, the law of the Spirit of life set me free from the law of sin and death. The expression, the law or Torah of sin and death, seen in Romans 8:2, isn't merely a reference to the Torah, but to the system of sin and death in those with a fixed behavior pattern, lawbreakers, who walk in the flesh as opposed to walking in the Spirit. The law still plays a vital role in the life of a believer as a moral and ethical guide, obeyed out of love for Yahweh and by the power that his set-apart Spirit provides, as we see in Jeremiah 31:33. I will put my law in their minds and write it on their heart. The difference is that what was once written on stone would now be imparted to us internally. The moral demands and principles of the law, again, instruction, were not lightened by Yeshua, but were made fuller and more far-reaching, as can be seen in Matthew 5:21 through 48. We see again in Ezekiel 36:26 through 28. I will give you a new heart and put a new spirit inside you. I will take the stony heart out of your flesh and give you a heart of flesh. The stony heart out of your flesh and give you a heart of flesh. I will put my spirit inside you and cause you to live by my laws, Torah, respect my rulings and obey them. You will live in the land I gave to your ancestors. You will be my people and I will be your Yahweh. There are those who told me that the law was nailed to the cross. It was the written requirements that were nailed to the cross. In Roman times, a list or record of the criminals' trespasses and sins was posted on a board and nailed to the cross, which is what Pilate did to Yeshua. What was nailed to the cross was the curse of sin and guilt and death. See Colossians 2:13 through 17. The renewed, I've got that in parentheses, re and new is not in parentheses, and ed is. So the new or renewed covenant, because of Messiah's becoming sin for us, freed us from that guilt, sin, and death, not from obeying Yahweh's commands. Yah's intent in sending his son was that the believers would be enabled through him to embody the true and full intentions of the law. Again, instruction. Hebrews 8:8 through 13 relate, for finding fault with them, he says, see, the days are coming, says Elohim, when I shall conclude with the house of Israel and with the house of Yehuda a renewed covenant, not according to the covenant that I made with their fathers in the day when I took them by the hand to lead them out of the land of Mitzrayim, Egypt, because they did not continue in my covenant, and I disregarded them, says Elohim. Because this is the covenant that I shall make with the house of Israel after those days, says Elohim, giving my laws in their mind, and I shall write them on their hearts, and I shall be their Elohim, and they shall be my people. Also in Chronicles 10:12 through 24, but he, having offered one slaughter offering for sins for all time, sat down at the right hand of Elohim, waiting from that time onward until his enemies are made a footstool for his feet. For by one offering he had perfected for all time those who are being set apart. As we walk in his ways, we are being set apart, and we continue to be set apart and endure to the end. And the set-apart Spirit also witnesses to us. For after having said before, this is the covenant that I shall make with them after those days, says Elohim, giving my laws into their hearts, and in their minds I shall write them, and their sins and their lawlessnesses I shall remember no more. Now where there is forgiveness of these, there is no longer a slaughter offering for sin. So brothers, having boldness to enter into the set-apart place by the blood of Messiah, by a new and living way which he instituted for us through the veil, that is his flesh, and having a high priest over the house of Elohim, let us draw near with a true heart in completeness of belief, having our hearts sprinkled from a wicked conscience and our bodies washed with clean water. Let us hold fast the confession of our expectation without yielding, for he who promised is trustworthy. And let us be concerned for one another in order to stir up love and good works. Faith without works is dead. It is about faith. But our faith shows our works. We follow his ways because we love him. Paul says in Romans 2:13, for it is not the hearers of the law who are justified as righteous, but the doers of the law who are justified as righteous before Yahweh. So I'm saying to those who say that was the old and this is the new, this is Romans 2:13. New Testament scripture. He states that the righteous are tearing down every high-minded thing that exalts itself against the knowledge of Yahweh. Later we see in Revelation 20:12, that's also New Testament. And the dead were judged according to what was written in the books, according to their deeds, works. We were also shown in Hebrews 9:11 through 14 that Messiah, who through the eternal Spirit offered himself without blemish to Yahweh to purify our conscience from dead works to serve the living Elohim. In essence, Yeshua provides believers with love for Yah's law, instruction, though they had previously hated it, as well as giving them the power through the set-apart Spirit to keep it. So once we love him, we seek to walk in his ways. It says, although we had previously hated his instruction, didn't even believe we needed to keep it, he gives us the power through his set-apart Spirit to keep it. Yeshua tells us in John 15:10 that if we obey his commands, we will remain in his love, just as he obeyed his Father's commands and remains in his love. He says that he calls us friends because everything he learned from his Father, he has made known to us. And in verse 10 of chapter 14, he says that the words he says to us are not just his own. John 8:25 shows Yeshua saying that what he has heard from his Father, he tells us. Verse 31 states that if we hold to his teaching, we are really his disciples, and that we will know the truth and we will be set free by it. In verse 39, Yeshua tells the Jews that if they were Abraham's children, they would do the things Abraham did. And we already read earlier that he walked in his ways and was considered righteous, which I'm about to say, so I won't say that now. Galatians 3:6 through 9 says about Abraham that he believed Yahweh and it was credited to him as righteousness, and that those who believe are children of Abraham. It states that the scripture foresaw that Yahweh would justify the Gentiles, nations, by faith and announce the gospel in advance to Abraham. Abraham was considered righteous, and the law had not even been written yet. Therefore, he followed Yahweh's commands before the requirements of the law were written and implemented. Torah was already established before it was given in stone at Mount Sinai. Genesis 26:5 confirms this, as Yahweh says, Abraham obeyed me and kept my requirements, my commands, my decrees, and my laws. I mean, that's proof right there. He was already obeying his instructions. They already knew the instructions and commands before it was even given. Note that Abraham was not a Jew. Genesis 12 tells the story of Yahweh calling Abraham, at that time Abram, to leave his father's house of idolaters/pagan worshippers. Abraham was of the Chaldeans from Ur. Yah called him to leave to go out from among those who worship the moon god, to separate himself from the post-Babel peoples. Abraham was the father of a new humanity, whereas Adam and Noah were fathers of the fallen human race. Yahweh told him that his descendants would be strangers in a country not their own, Genesis 7:6. Therefore, if we are Abraham's descendants, and as believers we are called to separate ourselves from idol worship, to live lives holy and pleasing to Yahweh. Yahweh said in Genesis 18:19 that he chose Abraham so that he, Abraham, would direct his children and his household after him to keep the way of Elohim by doing what is right and just. Revelation 12:17 states, so the dragon became enraged at the woman and went off to make war with the rest of her offspring, those who keep the commandments of Yahweh and hold to the testimony of Yeshua. That is scripture. Revelation 12:17. So the dragon is not making war with those who just say they believe or call themselves Christians. He is making war with those who keep the commandments and hold to the testimony of Messiah. We are told that we are no longer under the law, but Revelation 14:12 shows us that here's the perseverance of the holy, set apart ones, those who keep the commandments of Yah and the faith, trust of Yeshua. Okay? For a brief time, I thought the information I had from the book was enough proof to answer the question regarding the Christmas trees being the Asherah pole. Later, Yah began showing me in Scripture those verses and situations that brought truth to light relative to how the information pertains to us today. Unfortunately, I had a tendency to run with things I believed Yahweh had spoken to me rather than wait on further instruction. He never told me when to teach it or whom to teach it. To whom to teach it. I just felt as though we, Christians mostly, as I was at that time, I was still a Christian at that time, but everyone who celebrates Christmas had been duped. That word came to me. I don't even use that word normally, but that's what came to my spirit. We, as Christians, had been duped. Most of us as Christians were taught that Christmas is about Christ. This Christmas issue opened a whole can of worms, including other topics and questions that will not be discussed in this book because I'm to focus solely on this topic. I've been studying and researching for the past 14 years and am still just scratching the surface. There are so many layers to His Word. We will never have all the answers. One person cannot have all the answers. I've been studying. Again, none of us will ever know all things. I did teach my class about the origins of Christmas that year, which was 2010. The girls asked good questions. I do not think any of them stopped celebrating, and I did not tell them to. I just gave them the facts that I had found. I did have one parent tell me that I needed to be careful not to confuse the children. I do want to say that I took teaching them very seriously. I did not want to teach them any wrong doctrine. I knew I was responsible for what they were learning and did not want to fail them. I loved all the girls, and it would have crushed me to know that I had taught them something that was not true. I wish that I had journaled my journey from the beginning so that I would remember events correctly, but I did not realize at the time that I would have to recall it later. Again, I will discuss the Christmas tree as an idol in a later chapter, and keep in mind that we discussed counterfeits earlier. Do we want to incur the punishment promised earlier in Revelation 22:18 and 19 of having our part taken away from the tree of life and the set-apart city because we took away from the words of His book and accepted a counterfeit tree for the authentic? So whether we agree or disagree, that's the end of chapter 4. So the next chapter will be chapter 5, covering His birth. Thank you so much.